welcome this huge one. Oh, yes.
Nice planet.
We'll talk about that a little bit more and in a second, but first, you know the deal. Hey guys, it's Geeky J, and we'll count down. Remember to press play, and when I say play, three, two, one, play. Yeah, that part is really awkward to me with Worf and the Edo and everyone lining up to get a hug. It's just awkward. But we'll talk about that more when we get there. Um, so a brief summary or synopsis for this one, and this one's season 1, episode 8, Justice. When Wesley Crusher is condemned to die on an idyllic primitive planet, Captain Picard must face breaking the Prime Directive to save the boy's life. And I do remember this episode uh, pretty well. This is one of the ones throughout the show, the first season, that I do remember, and it's just because it was really awkward to me. Uh, the Edo and the whole planet, but we'll, like I said, we'll talk about that more soon enough. Well, see, I've never experienced a holodeck, so I can't really compare it to that, Beverly. Oh, well, you miss a huge thing. I don't. This is such a. Uh, uh, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just this is a really open and forward episode, and I guess the Ito were an open and forward people, so in that sense, it makes sense. But that little clip with Worf is funny in my opinion. Oh, I hope I don't get banned or breaking some violation with that. But hey, it's not me. It's Worf. You gotta blame Worf for that, and Michael Dorn. Yeah, I don't think you'll approve it, Picard. Oh, see, yep, you know it's true. It's way too good to be true. So let me give you that synopsis one more time, just to refresh. Well, not really refresh, but just because I feel like it. When Wesley Crusher is condemned to die on an idyllic planet, primitive planet, Captain Picard must face breaking the Prime Directive to save the boy's life. And I think this is a really interesting premise for an episode. And I think this, so far out of the episodes we've seen, this is probably my favorite premise. Maybe not necessarily my favorite episode, but definitely my favorite premise. And I'm not really sure what my favorite episode would be this far. They kind of blend together in a way for me as far as like per- overall performance wise. But I think this episode does have good moments and awkward moments of that. You know, they do have awkward moments, and it's just a somewhat cringe level today that I don't know. Maybe if you watched it originally when it first aired, it wasn't as cringy as I feel it is now. Let me know if you did see it originally. If you, when you saw it, you felt like awkward and weird, because that's kind of how I felt. And but that's coming from today's perspective. I don't know. Maybe that's just a personal thing. And I was reading, and apparently Gene Roddenberry wanted the Ito to wear even less clothing, but the costume designer couldn't make it any skimpier without risking the clothing falling off and revealing something that shouldn't be revealed. I mean, those outfits. I mean, I, I just don't see that plan on Earth. Unless it's I mean, maybe a bikini, and that's the only place you'd ever see that. See, this is just overtly sexual in a way that a lot of shows aren't. Especially with Wesley right there, and with everyone around, it's a little awkward. Very forward and open and awkward. And again, dang Troy knows. And again, I guess that's how the Edo are. But it plays off. I don't know. Just like, come on. Don't you mean sexuality? No, well, I guess she does mean sensuality. There we go. That's the opening I had. Nice planet. A Worf. But see, my thing is, I thought Worf only wanted Klingon women. Maybe the Edo, or well, I guess if any race, it would be them would be capable of it. Uh. I wonder how Will Wheaton felt about filming this part. And I was reading, the line that comes on later on after everything goes down with Wesley, where he says that Will Wheaton says that he still cringes to this day when Wesley says, "I'm with Starfleet. We don't lie." He admits that it was he finds it cringy, but he admits it serves a purpose, showing that Wesley may be smart, but he's still, a naive young kid. And I remember thinking like, well, if these guys, if the adults are like this, how are the kids, Except you die in case you violate a rule. I don't understand. Well, I guess, and I wonder why the Edo run. It doesn't really address why they run. It's just something they do, I guess. When and where, sir? Worf. So apparently, this episode marks the first appearance of reoccurring season one background actor Steve Reed, who was hired at his local gym for this episode. So look out for him. Oh, see, like the innuendo in this is also pretty intense, and the the you the clothing that the male dudes wear is just just kind of revealing. It's not even the men. Just the clothing is extremely revealing, and I don't see what more Gene Roddenberry wanted or why he would have wanted it. And this right here, this would imagine being a young kid, 12, 13, watching Star Trek with your parents, and this episode comes on. Oh my God, I would have died. Ugh, I would have died. And look, what is going on here with the legs and the oil? And apparently, this episode was also the first to feature location shots since the holodeck scene in Encounter at Farpoint. And I remember, I don't really remember what. It's like it's like a god or something, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure what for certain what it actually is. If I remember correctly, it looked like like almost like a Deep Space Nine type craft. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Ready. And I don't think, okay, yeah, I guess it does respond. Uh, is this that guy that I was talking about? Josh Clark, who later went on to play Joe Carey in Voyager, appears here as an unnamed tactical officer. I'm not sure. I haven't seen Voyager. Maybe it was that guy. I don't know. And there goes another space painting like I was talking about in the last episode. Me neither. I honestly can't remember what's going on besides the Ito element to it. I do remember she goes up in the ship. Yeah, that must be him. That must be the unnamed tactical officer. And I think that guitar instrument we saw earlier is Adam's guitar seen in Star Trek: The Way of Eden. And another uh, instrument similar appears in the Next Generation When the Bow Breaks. Because we don't know what to call it. That's pretty crazy. Can you imagine being on the ship and seeing something like that? That's a pretty cool, intimidating voice or commanding voice. And apparently, this episode was rewritten by Gene Roddenberry and Worley Thorne, and they created the godlike entity that we see now. And they obviously they sexed up the Ito, which I kind of wonder how they originally were, if they were less cringy. So I don't know if I agree with. Well, I guess if that's how the culture is. So this episode originally aired November 7th, 1987, and the director was James L. Conway for this episode. They want to explore and see the colony. What I'm not sure of is how they found out about the Edo and decided it was a good idea to travel down there. Like, does this violate the Prime Directive, or had they already previously made contact with the Edo? And if that's the case, why did the godlike entity only reveal himself now as opposed to earlier? Because when they first go down, they already say that she says, uh, "Glad to see you again" to Riker. Don't do it, Data. No, Brent Spiner. Attack of the bubble. Attack of the godlike bubble. See the okay, so the girl's wearing blue and that guy's wearing pink. I wonder if I guess it just depends on preference what color. Can you imagine what they're seeing right there? What if that's actually Will Wheaton or a stunt double? Awkward and innuendo-y. Oh, oh, okay. Oh man, Wesley. Oh, it's just cringe. How did she know about baseball, but not that she needed a bat? No, I wouldn't go to the gardens if I were you. Just can you imagine just PDA everywhere? That's completely different culture. Owner, I guess you just I don't know. Man, this is a really sensual planet. Like I wonder if there's like I wonder how they do family units and structure things like that. Okay, so yeah, Klingon woman, Clark says, but he was saying nice planet earlier, implying that, he was going to enjoy the customs of the locals. I guess he decided against it. Bragging, sir? Oh, see, okay, yeah, I do remember this episode. So, a character error apparently is that Riker concludes that they have lost contact with the ship after trying its communicator. Without even trying another communicator, he concludes that there is no point and gathers everyone together. We as the audience know obviously what the problem is. It's the godlike entity, but Riker doesn't. The Obviously the most likely problem is that his communicator just isn't working. He should have just asked Worf to contact the ship, but maybe he just wasn't thinking in that line of direction at the time. I wonder how you come to a consensus that if you break a law, you automatically die, no matter uh, how severe the crime is. Uh, that's something she should have really looked into before they went down there. That's foreshadowing right there. Maybe instead of a white wall or fence, you can have a sign that says, "Don't enter here, you will die." That might be a better indication that you should probably stay away from an area instead of a white fence. Just saying, Edo people. Just saying. But I mean, I wonder where this is filmed because it is a beautiful looking location. Comment down below if you do know where this was filmed. We don't really see any other children on the Enterprise uh, until later on, really, and I wonder why that is. I guess the story just didn't call for it. We don't really see interactions between Wesley and other children on the Enterprise. Mediators, those are the police. That guy reminds me of somebody, but I have no idea who it is. Don't admit it. And that's the line I was talking about earlier that Will Wheaton cringes at. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Nobody, nobody had to say anything. Dang, so they're like the Judge Dredd of this world. Judge, jury, and executioners. Intense music too. Well, it fits with the severity of the situation. He's like, well, duh, it's poison. Well, I mean, do you kill your friends? I mean, you think they'd just be like, okay, we can let it slide. You know, we can just let it slide this once. And you think the Ito would tell you about something this severe before allowing you to go off and do your own thing. I mean, basic, any good guide would know to say, hey, you could die. Maybe if they weren't so sensually focused, they would have thought to say something, you know. But it is what it is. Oh, okay. So I read it right here that the filming location was right under the flight path of Van Nuys Municipal Airport. So the airplanes were constantly flying overhead of the actors, and the entire scenes filmed there had to be redubbed in post production. Okay, that makes sense because it did seem a little off. So this was actually the first script to be commissioned for the next for the series after uh, Star Trek Encounter at Farpoint. But they had to do extensive rewrites, and it actually ended up being the eighth episode to be filmed, like you're seeing now. Well, yeah, the eighth episode. And so John D.F. Black used his pseudonym Ralph Willis in the credits because The televised episode bears little resemblance to his original script, with the rewrites that they had to do, and it being up, and it ended up being the eighth episode. Oh yeah, I remember they do have till sundown to actually do what they do the to do what they need to do as far as carrying out the sentence for Wesley. But I don't know if I trust him. I'd still want Wesley there with me. And the model actually for the Edo god that we saw earlier, that object in space, would be later reused as the Lycean Central Command in the Star Trek TNG Conundrum. Mm. Kind of like Minority Report. I wonder if that's what he's talking about. Like we eventually evolved a Minority Report type style government. I don't know. He's basically saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. But the Prime Directive, says we can't interfere. Yeah, this is where we talk about sunset. So, in the original script, Black said that the colony of Laurelroth installed punishment zones to fight anarchy. However, the zones are enforced to abide the law, but for only those who are deemed not immune to them. An Enterprise D security guard, Officer Tenson, protecting two children while on shore leave, happens upon a crime scene and is shot dead by the policeman Sywell, who is also killed by his partner Oitap on the spot for misinterpreting his duty. In his first draft, Picard decides not to help the rebels led by a renege who fight against the system of Council Member Trebor. Finally, it turns out that the rebels install a similarly totalitarian regime when they gain power. In the second draft, the rebel leader called Reneg is put on trial and executed for treason. Picard muses on the topic of people having their right to decide their own justice without interference. I thought that could have been an interesting episode. Maybe a little more interesting than actually what we ended up getting, but maybe somehow involve Wesley too in that situation. I wonder how that would have worked. Maybe Wesley could have somehow ended up in a punishment zone. But I think that would have been an interesting premise. Maybe they should have had. Well, I'm not sure, but that does sound like an interesting uh, premise. So this is actually the first of three times the captain shows a native female her home planet from the Enterprise or from orbit. So what happens again in Nuria, and with Nuria in Star Trek TNG, Who Watches the Watchers, and Lily in First Contact. And we also saw this actually in the Orville, uh, in that episode where we have the up and down votes on that planet similar to Earth. He takes the girl up in uh, the Orville to show her, not necessarily to show her her home planet, but to get advice on how to help one of the crew. I actually thought that was a pretty good episode, and it does hark back to Star Trek in that way. Actually, I feel like those two episodes are that episode of the Orville and this episode, Justice, parallel each other a lot. And earlier when Riker tells Worf when in Rome while they're running and arriving, and later on Rubicon 3, Julian Bishar also says the same thing to Worf during the trip to Risa in Deep Space Nine. Okay, so the Edo exteriors, I just read here that they were filmed at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant in North Los Angeles. I figured it was California somewhere. And the actual section where Wesley falls is at the Huntington Library in Pasadena. And so, oh, it actually goes on to say that the Tillman plant was used to represent Starfleet Academy and Starfleet headquarters in later Star Trek episodes. And Conway actually directed this episode after having filmed MacGyver Jack in the Box. So, Picard says that he had no choice but to beam Riven up to the ship. But Data had just recovered information in his exchange with the godlike creature. Picard ignores his request to speak with him, um, and for all Picard knew, Data had already had the information he wanted. And in fact, we'll see that Data actually knows a lot more about, uh, or knows a lot more about the situation than the Edo do. And this is actually, you can tell Beverly is really upset about the situation with Wesley. But you would expect her to be a little bit more upset. But in this time period, people do seem to have a little bit more control over their emotions. Well, maybe I take some of that back. She does look. She's just trying to be professional. And anyone, let me know. I mean, I can't remember if I asked you this, but I'm really curious why a doctor examines data. So why not someone more close to engineering? Wouldn't that make more sense? Maybe if you do know, let me know. I'm not sure. And also, when the entity appears through the floor of the bridge, I guess it's a little bit of a continuity area, but Data does look surprised. So, is that him just imitating humans, or what's going on there? But usually, you would think Data would have no emotion about the situation. And apparently, at the beginning, the leg of a light stand can be seen to the left of Picard in the opening bridge scene. So, if you want to go back and look at that, just pause the video, and that's pretty interesting. I always like when you catch those little things that shouldn't be there. And Picard states that the Prime Directive was never intended for a member of any Star Trek crew to lose their life. But in later episodes, we do realize the importance, or we don't necessarily realize it, but the value or the importance of the Prime Directive changes it becomes more important even than the entire crew of a ship. Um, members of Starfleet are prepared to die for the Prime Directive. So they do change the Prime Directive a little bit, or at least their attitude towards it changes. And I can't remember why they have. Uh, why I do not remember why the entity is there. Data. He does tend to babble, huh? Oh, see, he does say that. uh, Data does he does change throughout the episodes. He learns more about not when to babble. So, also one thing about the Prime Directive is it's mentioned heavily here, but just being on that planet is a violation of the Prime Directive. Uh, if they haven't ever had any previous knowledge of space travel or aliens. I mean, it's stated in First Contact that the Federation only makes initial contact with planets on the cusp of developing warp travel, and I really don't see the Ito developing warp travel anytime soon. And they also don't want to corrupt indigenous cultures, and I feel like they are probably doing that with the Ito. Let me know what you guys think about that. Maybe it's the not the descendants, but the relatives of the Ito that somehow made it into space. If you guys know exactly what's going on, let me know. I really feel as though this. I mean, it could have been a better episode overall if that godlike entity hadn't even been involved. If we just examine the society's rules regarding law and order, I think that should have been really more or less the central main focus of the episode completely, and not even delved into a godlike entity or anything like that. Because that's what I find is interesting in this episode: how the society deals with uh, crime and how they uh, do punishments. And I think some are wearing white uniforms. I'll just call them uniforms. Some are wearing like a pinkish color, and I believe I did earlier see a boy running in blue. And I wonder if it's just personal preference or if it has any significance. Well, Captain Picard could easily get Wesley off the hook if he just slide there, but that's not his who he is. And obviously the mediators were great. I wonder if they have like a standing army or anything like that. I feel like if they would have actively went to the planet, like the Edo had been involved with the Federation a little bit, they did go to the planet to spend time. No one told Wesley about the situation. He broke the law. That could have been a better episode where we argue against them uh, changing their law. That could have been a better episode. But overall, I think it's a good idea, but doesn't execute as well as it should because there are some issues with the continuity and overall episode. And from what I remember, I think he does, but I don't remember how they get out of the situation, so it's interesting to see it again. I can't remember if they take him now or. Oh, I don't think they let them beam up. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Again, this episode raises great questions, but I just feel like it could have been executed slightly better. Maybe if they hadn't have toiled with the original script so much, but I do think it's a overall okay episode. It's not a horrible episode. I'll say yeah, I've said that earlier, but it just seems ridiculous that they would hold him to the same standard. But then again, you have to argue, well, shouldn't they hold him to the same standard? Nope, they got the beam over. I guess that's why I don't remember it, why how they got away because it was pretty rather simple. It was actually rather simple how they left the planet. They just grab Wesley and leave. But I don't like if there were human colonists that close. Well, I guess as close as any solar system can be. I don't understand why no one had met with the Ito or maybe if you guys know the situation or the setup before this episode, let me know because I'm genuinely curious as to what was happening before this episode started. The Federation's relationship between or with the Ito and everything involving this episode generally. The planet looks extremely Earth-like. But yeah, guys, so that was that episode, Justice, episode 8. It's I like the questions that it raises. Like I said earlier, it's just the execution for me isn't there. Let me know how you guys feel about it. Again, Thank you guys for watching. Look out for the next episode. I enjoy doing these videos. Have a good one. Talk to you later. Bye.